Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Rick Marr. I'm the CEO and visionary of Turning Point Human Capital Management. And uh, Today, the intention is to spend about the next 10 or 15 minutes and talking about how employee benefits brokers in particular, for whatever reason, their clients seem to believe that they should know everything about HR and come to them for various things that could put pressure on the broker, right? So we work with a lot of brokers across the country who have used a relationship with us to create strategic HR solutions for their clients so that when those clients come to them and ask them a question, they don't have to deal with it. They can push it on to us. More importantly, what it will allow is for that client relationship to expand. And more importantly, we'll get into this a little bit later, to protect that client relationship from other brokers who may be trying to poach the business. So, with that said, my name is Rick Marr. As I said, I'm the CEO and visionary of Turning Point Human Capital Management. And, I started this business in 2010. And since 2010, we've worked with over 2,500 businesses across the country. And we've operated in 49 of the 50 United States, so we're national. And we've worked in over 65 different industries, and in many cases, working with clients who were referred to us from a broker, right? Additionally, we'll talk about this a little bit later. Our referral fees really are second to none in this industry, and brokers seem to be really appreciative of that. So let's jump in and talk about how benefits brokers can protect their business and expand their client relationships with strategic HR solutions. What's the broker's competitive reality, right? So you all operate in a pretty tough world, right? It's crowded, it's it's super competitive, right? There's a lot of brokers knocking on doors, and it kind of creates. I've heard from brokers really, a couple of problems that they deal with, right? So the first problem is brokers need an edge, right? So think about some of the really large brokerage firms. They have HR consulting as part of their as an arrow in their quiver, if you will, right? So the mid to smaller size broker might be putting themselves at a disadvantage. So if some other broker can say, "Hey, I can provide a service," it behooves the mid-size or smaller broker to make sure that they can also provide that kind of service, whatever that may be, right? So the second problem is without HR support, clients risk compliance issues, right? Employee dissatisfaction and turnover. What does that mean? That means less people are enrolled in the benefit options, right? Less revenue, less clients, right? So proper HR support can not only help maintain some of the level of business, but also be the person on site to work with you and your team to help get more employees enrolled. So if you have a 100 life group and there's only 35 people enrolled in the health insurance, what would it do to your business if you can get that to 45 people, right? So those incremental revenue pieces are very helpful. The third problem is a lot of smaller businesses lack a dedicated HR department. So they look at the broker as kind of their go-to person for a question about employee things, right? So for whatever reason, the client has decided that the broker is the person who should know HR, which I don't know how they got there, but that could put a lot of pressure on a broker because if they don't know the answer, right, then they don't want to look foolish or they don't want to open a crack for another broker who is offering HR service to come in. Or secondarily, it takes them out of their game. Now they have to go find a solution, go find an answer, go respond to the client, deal with it, and it takes them away from their selling, their growing of their book of business. So the brokers, you all live in a very competitive world, and there are a lot of different angles to look at that competitiveness, right? So, so a lot of brokers, as I kind of referenced already, they use HR as a secret weapon, right? And there's four what we've found four distinct value drivers for brokers, right? So the first thing is HR support equals relationship multipliers for brokers, right? So I kind of referenced this earlier. When a broker brings us into their client, right? And we're managing the HR for their client, we're not only part of the team, right? Part of the team at the client, but we're part of your team, right? And our job is to make sure that you know everything that's going on. You know where things are happening, and we can work together to solve problems, but importantly, create opportunities, right? So think about just the typical when you've got a new client, you talk to the owner of a business and they say, "Hey, I need you to talk to my HR team," right? Well, imagine where the HR team and another broker is calling on your client. Well, they're not going to get too far when we know that you've brought us in. So it's a little bit of a gatekeeper, right? The second driver of this is clients depend on you as the broker, not just for benefits, but for helping with HR challenges, right? So we all heard, if someone calls you, that's an opportunity, right? So we want them thinking about you, right? When these things come up, right? And it gives you the opportunity to be the solution provider, right? Which really creates the third thing, which is the trusted advisor versus the vendor, right? So figuring ways and looking for opportunities for you not just to install the medical, the dental, or the long-term disability, whatever it might be, or the voluntary benefits. But how do you also become that trusted advisor so that you can do both, right? It creates multiple opportunities, right? And then finally is strengthening the loyalty of the client and reducing the client churn, right? We all know, we've all heard it 1,000 times. It's way harder to go acquire a new client than it is to expand an existing one, right? It's easier to do that. It's much more stable, and they're much more open to when you're that trusted advisor to take your advice and buy more lines of coverage. So this is how some brokers are using HR as the secret weapon to differentiate themselves and gain more business and keep clients happier longer. Right. So common challenges that small businesses face, right? So these are the things that your clients may be coming to you for, right? Or asking you questions about, or even, just maybe they're just talking to you and they say something and you just kind of say, I don't really know, right? And that's not really good. So we've seen this, as I mentioned earlier, we've worked with over 2,500 small businesses across the country. And those businesses all look exactly the same. They're first or second generation family types of businesses with a couple of handfuls to a couple of hundred employees. So we've done this thousands of times, all right? And here are the things that the four basic buckets that their problems fall into that they tend to come to their broker, right? So policies and procedures, right? Handbooks, job descriptions, that sort of thing. Compliance matters, right? So every day, as we all know, there's some new law, rule, or regulation designed to drive that business owner insane, right? So whether it's federal laws, state laws, or even local laws now. So the third thing are employee issues, everything from hiring properly, firing properly. Why can't Susie get to work on time, and why is Johnny harassing everybody kind of stuff. And then the final thing is kind of training or organizational development. How to get the right players on the team in the right seats, all working together to reach their individual goals, their division's goals, and their company goals, if those goals even exist in these small businesses, which most of the times they never do. So kind of, those problems that I just described, right? We've have some proven solutions, right? And I kind of mentioned this earlier. So the first thing for our broker partners, right? We pay 10% ongoing commissions for the life of the client. So if you bring us into a client and that client is with us for however long, and let's say they spend on average about $3,000 monthly. There's the math. That's 300 bucks a month in what I call mailbox money, right? Helps you, helps us, helps the client, and really makes it a good situation. So these numbers you see on the screen, really this goes to who we are. As I mentioned earlier, we've worked with over 2,500 businesses. We've operated with over 65 different industries, so we're industry agnostic, right? We can really work with just about any business. There's really nothing. Employees are employees. The laws are the laws for the most part. So, again, we've worked in 49 different states, right? So we're national. We can deliver our services anywhere, and we've been in business over 16 years. And then on the bottom, you kind of see these are kind of our services. So on-demand HR, which is our true fractional HR management designed specifically for the client. The second bucket are policies and procedures. We call it HR Protect, writing things like handbooks, and we write hundreds of handbooks a year, job descriptions, those sorts of things. Then kind of HR laws and assessments, right? So we've built technology that tracks for every single client any HR law that updates or changes or affects their business. We do HR risk assessments for them. And then the fourth real bucket of services are trainings, right? So we trained just last year alone over 22,000 employees on sexual harassment training alone, so anti-harassment training. So we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of different services that are designed to make it easier for your clients, and more importantly, to bring some revenue to you and your firm. So real results, kind of, here's just some kind of things that have happened in the past 6, 8 months as some brokers that we work with. So in one instance, a broker brought us in and we were able to help that client avoid a $500,000 penalty because of our risk assessment. That broker was a hero, right? Hero, right? That client loyalty really changed things for them. So we had another client that was able to deepen their relationship because they brought us in for training. Now, the average client, average employee at that company that they brought us into was making $100,000 a year, right? So the reason the training was so important was because they had high turnover. And depending on the numbers and where you get your stats from, but essentially, every time an employee turns over, it's between a 50% and 100% cost of that annual salary just to train that person and get them up to speed. So if someone's making 100,000 and they leave, well, it costs between 50 and 100,000 to get them, to hire the headhunter, to do the stuff, to bring them on, to train them, to get them productive. So it's a very expensive proposition. So they brought us in to help that with the training. And then we had a client that, they ended up staying. They were in a competitive situation, and the broker was earning about $50,000 off the case. And it was a competitive situation, and they were potentially going to lose the client because they didn't offer HR, right? So they brought us in and we were able to fill that gap and they ended up, retaining the business. So that was a $50,000 win for that broker. So that was really huge. So there's some real results, some real opportunities for brokers when they partner with us on their HR for their clients. So really, kind of this comes from just conversations with lots of brokers across the country, and it's the psychology that they talk about. And these are some of the things they said to me. They said people stay with advisors that they trust and who make them feel safe, right? You all know, you know health insurance, it's visceral, right? It's something that's super important to everybody, not just for employees, but everyone who's involved, right? So if they have an advisor that they really trust rather than someone who's just getting them the benefits, they tend to stay with that client longer, right? HR support triggers the brain's need for security and predictability, right? So from a business owner's perspective, they want to know that their most expensive asset, their human capital, that's what they spend the most on, right? Salaries, benefits, et cetera. So we're combined together. Um, for that business owner, if those employees are engaged, staying longer, working as a team, it creates security and predictability for that business owner, right? So when they're happy, we're all happy. And then really, some other brokers have said things along the lines that they were able to prevent their clients from costly HR pitfalls, legal compliance, Department of Labor stuff, and they really just became the hero. So it deepened deepened their relationship. So the psychology behind this is I'm going to say it's almost like obvious, like holy cow, this can do this for me and my business and me and my clients. So it's really cool stuff. So so we made it really simple, right? So, just some questions. How confident are you in your HR policies, right? We have a trusted partner. And the real highlight for the owner is no added work for them and no added work for the broker, right? Just better coverage, better help for the employees, right? So our typical client, kind of this lays it out here. They're 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 first or second generation founder led family-owned types of businesses that have between a couple of handfuls and a couple of hundred employees, right? So really, we're built for these types of businesses and the way that most brokers are calling on their clients. So really, in finality here, what's the next step, right? It's simple, right? Book a call with me, right? We could talk through where you want to go, what you're trying to achieve. We do a free HR risk assessment. It's a skinny down version, but we can do that for any of your clients. If you have 100 clients, we can do it for them. So it gives a nice report. So you can give them something tangible. You could talk through it. It look identifies obvious risks, right? In about 8 areas of HR. And also, it's a written report that they can have, hold, it's tangible, and it gives them a roadmap of where they should start. So it makes it easier for our broker partners to introduce this to their client base. So, with that said, I want to thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and hope you have a great day.